Hello and welcome to Commodity Culture, where we break down the commodity space for both new and experienced investors. My name is Jesse Day, and before we get started, standard disclaimer: nothing here is investment advice. Do your own due diligence. And this episode is brought to you by moneymetals.com, the most trusted online bullion dealer and depository in the United States. Use Money Metals for purchasing, selling, or storing physical gold and silver. Hit the link in the description below to learn more and use coupon code JESSEDAY to get a $10 discount on your first purchase. Today's guest is the author of The Endgame Investor, a gold-based approach to protecting wealth and profiting off Fed inflation. Somebody I always love talking to. It's Rafi Farber. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Jesse. Good to be back.
Good to have you here. Now, first off, we were talking off camera, obviously, about the conflict going on there. We're happy you and your family are safe. It's obviously an extremely trying time. You mentioned you did not feel safe. I wonder if we could take a step back and look at the trend of global conflict that seems to be on the rise. Do you think there's any connection between these events? Do you expect things to intensify? And is this all part of the end game you've been speaking about?
Yes, it's all connected. It's all part of one thing. I don't mean that in a conspiratorial way. I don't think there's any one group that's planning, well, first we're going to release a disease and then we're going to make everybody take shots and then we're going to, thin out the population and then we'll start a war with it. I don't think there's any plan that is being executed by any single group of people or a group of groups. I just think this is the natural devolution of society when inflation gets to a certain point, because you have people getting poorer and poorer, not able to make a living and getting deeper and deeper into debt. And the only answer for them is to get more welfare and more government subsidies and eventually join the army, fight, and then start a war because the government's so powerful at that point that that's just the direction they go in. So yes, this is all connected, and the more inflation, the more war, and the more war, the more inflation, until you get into a positive feedback loop where the entire currency system collapses and they can't fund war anymore, and that's what I'm waiting for. So hopefully this war or wars or whatever's going on burns out whatever remains in the gas tank of the monetary system, and then we can rebuild from there. But I want as little destruction as possible. What it would start, or wars would start at the conflict centers, and there's been a conflict here since the 19th century when Jews started coming back to Israel, and the other people didn't want us to come back, so they fought. Makes sense. And that war never ended. It's not like the war ended in 1948, ended in 1967. It was never finished. And it'll be finished when one side wins and the other side loses, which has never been allowed to happen. So maybe it'll finish this round, maybe it won't. I don't think anything's going to finish until the dollar is dead, because who's stopping one side from winning? That would be the states and the Western powers, and they're funded by the dollar. So the worst thing that could happen for our region is America gets involved, either directly or indirectly. They're already indirectly involved. If they get directly involved, it'll be even worse. So I am an advocate for America staying the hell out of here and letting Israel do whatever it needs to do. And you don't even have to give us any weapons or anything. Don't be involved. Just leave us the hell alone. But that's not going to happen until there's no more dollar. When there's no more dollar, then the war will be over.
Yeah, leaving people the hell alone, not something the U.S. is known to do in general. Now, when we're looking around the world at this point in time, politics, especially when we look at Western nations where we're not used to things being this absurd and this brazenly corrupt, when you look at what's happening in the United States, in Canada as well, literally our prime minister has been, accused of so many scandals that he should be getting punished in some way for it, and it doesn't happen. It's like he's being appointed to investigate himself. So it's getting kind of crazy in that sense. Obviously, this is kind of part and parcel with the whole circus that goes with the massive inflation you're talking about and the move towards eventual collapse of the dollar. I'm wondering what the main themes you're paying attention to in the political realm are at the moment. What has you concerned? well, even what has you positive, if anything?
I was called an accelerationist in an interview that I did with Michael Rechtenwald. I think he's running for the Libertarian presidential nomination. Fun game, but whatever. And he called me an accelerationist, and that I just want to see this move as fast as possible towards maximum insanity, so that we can just get it over with. Because there's no stopping anything. We're headed in a direction where everything's going to fall apart. So the sooner the better. Uh, the if theoretically, right, some messianic figure or something were to take over all the power in the world and say, okay, we're going to stop the money printing, we're going to stop this inflation, and we're going to have honest money across the world, and I'm going to manage it, and it's going to be perfect. Assuming that was even true, or that it was even possible, you'd still go through a collapse, because you can't just, decide to be honest all of a sudden. If you stole trillions of dollars, you got to return that. And when you return it, you're going to be poor, which means that when we move to sound money, everyone's going to be poor, except for the people that actually have money, which means the stackers, right? That's the money. The rest is just fantasy built upon that money. And it's exchangeable at some rate. We just don't know what that rate is. So there is no way to get out of the pain. It's not going to happen. So, the insanity of politics just follows the insanity of monetary policy, which follows the insanity of foreign policy and war and egging on nuclear conflict. It's all the same insanity weaved together in a big mix of hilariously awful behavior. So one thing that's encouraging is it seems, though I don't really follow this day to day, or because at this point I just ignore all the news and I don't even know what to trust, even in the most basic sense. I used to, let's say around the COVID era, I would I would like briefly look at online sources of news just for the headlines, and I wouldn't even read the articles because they were just too disgusting. just to see a basic sense of what's going on. I can't even get that anymore. I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know how many people were actually killed in Gaza. I don't know what Israel is doing there. That you can report on, Israel bombed the hospital, but it was really Hamas, or, Hamas really conducted the attack and raped women and killed babies. Did they behead them? Did they not behead them? How many people were? I don't know anything that's going on anymore. And the entire news cycle is just pure lies. I'm sure there's some kind of kernel of something that's going on and something very bad, but that's all I can get. And yes, I've talked to people in the South. I know people in the South. I know that there was a big massacre. I just don't know exactly what happened. I don't think we'll know for many months or maybe even years. So the one thing that's encouraging is that it seems to me to be that people are getting sick with this men or women, women or men kind of thing. And people are starting to come back to the point where, okay, maybe there's actually two genders. It seems to be a little bit of a counterculture happening now. And so we might have reached peak insanity. I don't see this as any more insane than COVID. A war in Gaza happens every 5-6 years because nobody allows it to finish. So if they don't allow this one to finish, it'll happen in the next 5 and 6 years. It'll be worse than this one. Every time it gets worse, right? So COVID seemed to be peak insanity. I think we're getting a little bit less insane and focused on what has to happen to finish this all until we get to a new monetary system. So things seem to be going in the right direction in a very wrong way, if that's the way to say it. But I mean, I'd rather this than going through COVID again, where I have to wake up every morning and say, why is this so stupid? At least I know that there are rockets flying over my head, and that is an objectively dangerous thing. So I'm like, okay, well, I can protect myself from that. I can't protect myself from a horde of idiots. I just have to ignore them. So this is I guess preferable. I mean, I don't want to say preferable, but at least it makes more sense.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. At least there's a clear and present danger that you're aware of, instead of, government policy and the masses following along with it blindly. Totally understand what you mean. I interviewed G. Edward Griffin, author of The Creature from Jekyll Island, recently, and he made a very interesting point, because I asked him, like, do you think governments are going to go back on a gold standard? And he said, you have to be very wary of that, because if it's the same people in power, they'll use all manner of deception to convince the masses they've seen the light, only to rug pull them and remove gold backing or go to a partially backed system or some other nonsense that benefits them and their small cartel of insiders above all else. So is it just as important to reset the politicians in charge, reset the entire political system? Do we even need government to go to the more anarchist point of view? What are your thoughts there?
There's not going to be a reset from the top down. It's not going to be Russia. It's not going to be China. It's not going to be any of them saying, oh, we've seen the light and we're going back to a gold standard. That's all nonsense. Because if they do that, they lose their power. Because the governments right now are so big and they have to pay so many bills that they can only pay them through inflation. If they ever go back on a gold standard, they've got to get rid of like 90% of government. And then all those people hit the streets and start rioting and then, kill the other 10% that are still in government. That's what would happen. So no, nobody's going to go back to a gold standard. Gold standard is going to be a bottom-up thing. It's going to be the dollar dies. All the derivatives based on the dollar die. Anything denominated in dollars is now worthless, and gold and silver are the monies that are circulating. So whoever has gold and silver will be the new government, if we can call them government. They'll be the power, and hopefully my aspiration is that most people in the world that stack gold and silver are good people, because we're the ones who are doing this now and we're the ones who see it coming, and everyone else is like, oh, what are you talking about? The dollar is king and they don't know what they're talking about, and let them fall. Let the people who have gold and silver take charge. And we should see a new world order that way, but it's not going to be BRICS gets together and says, oh, we're going back to a gold standard. Now we're going to be in charge, or the Fed saying, you know what, this is true. The dollar is really gold, and we're going to go back to that, and everything's going to be fine. It's not going to be fine, because the inflation has been 50 years in the making. And if we go back to the Great Depression, how long was the inflation? It was from 1921, which was the post. There was an extreme deflationary event, 1920, 1921. It was even worse than the crash of 29. And from 1921 to 1929, that was just 8 years of inflation. That was it. And then after 8 years of inflation, there was a crash and you had a depression. We're talking about now 50 years of inflation. So 8 times, let's say 6, it's going to be 6 times as worse as the Great Depression. Doesn't mean it's going to last 60 years, but it means it's going to be very extreme in terms of wealth realignments. Very extreme. And unlike the Great Depression, when the dollar was still functional, because what it did was deflate the dollar back down so that it would be more on par with the gold exchange rate, then people got poorer, but the dollar was still functional. Now people are going to be poorer and the dollar is not going to be functional. So it's going to be much worse. But afterwards, the world will be much better if you survive it. Good luck.
Yeah, you brought up Russia and China there, so I wanted to read a quote from a recent article by Alistair McLeod on Zero Hedge. He said, China and Russia have accumulated significant quantities of gold, and by gold mine output are the world's largest by far. The prospect of the Asian hegemons returning to gold standards is bound to draw attention by contrast to the weakness and fallacies behind fiat currencies. Now, you mentioned Russia and China are not going to be able to return to a true gold standard. What do you think they're getting at? Do you think they are going to do some sort of non-redeemable gold or commodities-backed system? Obviously, this goes back to the issue that G. Edward Griffin was saying, is you can't really trust the government when they're saying these things. So what are your thoughts on the potential for Russia and China releasing some sort of quasi gold-backed currency and the potential impact it could have?
No, I think there's zero chance of that. They're not going to do anything like that. First of all, it would be impossible for China, because China is so enmeshed inside the American economic monetary system that they can't get out of it unscathed. It's not like China is on top of America or more powerful because they produce the stuff and America produces the dollars, but it's all a circle. Like, it goes together. And once the dollar dies, the Chinese can't continue their economic system as they have. So they have to, they're also part of the inflationary system. So when it collapses, they have to reorganize their entire economy. And that requires everyone who's participating in it now to be destitute and find something else to do, because you have malinvestments. This is what Mises said. Like, the boom it alters the entire structure of the economy. So people are doing things that they wouldn't otherwise be doing if money was honest. So everything that the Chinese are doing now is because of the inflationary system, and nothing is going to survive it. Right? It's not even clear if the massive pieces of capital that are there to feed American consumerism in the trade based on the dollar, if they're even going to survive the process. Because in order to keep humongous pieces of capital alive, you need humongous pieces of credit or chunks of credit that you can only create through the inflationary system. So everything is going to have to break down into more localized economies. Doesn't mean there's not going to be international trade, but it's going to be much less of it. And the trade that you're going to see in the world after the collapse of the dollar is much more locally based. And you'll have islands of sound money in local communities, right? China's a huge country. It's going to break up into like 1,000 pieces or more. And so is Russia. Everyone's part of the same pyramid here. It's not like any of them can escape it. They're all inflationary. Russia prints money, China prints money, America prints money. Why? Because we all want to stay in the same basic exchange rates, or the entire Keynesian system gets messed up. So it's all the same system. It's not like China and Russia are outside of it. It's all the same pyramid. It's just like some people are more outwardly antagonistic to it, like Putin and Xi Jinping, but they're part of it too. There's one Tower of Babel here, and it's got to fall, and all of them are going to fall together.
Well, speaking of a potential fall, the Japanese yen continues to face headwinds, dropping to the lowest level against the US dollar in more than 33 years as the Bank of Japan makes alterations to its yield curve control. Japan continues to look like the canary in the coal mine for the global economy, and kind of a case study in how long you can kick the can down the road. Do you think they could be one of the first dominoes to fall in a collapse of the monetary system?
I don't know if they'll be the first, but I'm almost 100% sure. And I have to say almost because I can never be 100% sure of anything. But I'm almost 100% sure that when Japan falls, the entire system will fall very shortly after, within days or weeks. I don't know if it's going to be the first or something else is going to cause Japan to fall, but that doesn't even matter. What matters is that Japan is like the fulcrum of the entire Keynesian system, because if Keynesianism works, sorry, my phone is dinging here. If Keynesianism works, then Japan proves it, because they're at like 260% GDP and they do nothing but print money, and the spirit of the kamikazes and the samurai have kept this all together. Japan is I don't want to say Japan is. I don't really know much about the Japanese culture or the people. I've never been there, but from American portrayals of Japanese culture, I sort of maybe understand that they are good at acting in a single unit and being on the same page with each other. So that would lend itself to keeping the Keynesian system going, squeezing every last drop of juice out of the Keynesian orange before just giving up. So, Japan's going to have a hard time. And when the yen falls, when Japanese government bonds fall, Japan is going to dump all of its dollars, and the dollar is going to fall shortly after that. I think it's within months now, from what I've seen, because the Bank of Japan, I think, owns the Bank of Japan. The balance sheet is 80% Japanese government bonds, which means the value of the yen depends on that 80%. The rest is like foreign currency cash and some gold. So when the value of Japanese bonds goes down, it doesn't help the yen, because the yen has to go down with the bonds that are backing it. So how can the yen go up? It can't really, other than small knee-jerk reactions from algorithms based on some news that lasts maybe a day or a week or something. But we're in the end stage of this, and when Japan falls, the rest of the Keynesian system will fall with it.
Yeah, and one interesting thing to note is that gold continues to hit all-time highs in Japanese yen, doing an incredible job of protecting purchasing power there. You recently released a video on your YouTube channel titled, "We have 2 to 3 months left before spare dollars run out." Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, spare dollars are basically the dollars that are left over that couldn't make it into the banking system in 2020 and 2021. for whatever regulatory reasons, or they had no place to put them because the cash has to be backed by assets on the other side of the balance sheet, and they couldn't get any more assets in because their balance sheet was full. I don't know exactly how it works, but for whatever reason, they couldn't put this cash in the banks, so they give it back to the Fed, and it's called a reverse repo. So that account, the amount of reverse repos outstanding are now at $1.07 trillion, and they're down about $1.1 trillion in October. So it was about $500 billion in October. So it's about the rate that we've been going since October is about 500 billion down. So that leaves at that rate about 2 months before they go to zero, or maybe 3 months if you want to say that the rate's going to slow down a little bit. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But so I say 2 to 3 months before the reverse repos are now zero. And then what happens when the Treasury, auctions off another set of bonds or treasuries, and there's no more money in the reverse repo facility? Who's going to buy them? Not the Fed, not anyone else, because the money supply is shrinking, even though the reverse repos are flowing into the system, which means the deflationary forces are humongous. And those deflationary forces, what are they actually? Well, it's bank loans being paid back at low interest rates that were taken out maybe 2-3 years ago, or even before, any time between 2008 and 2020. All those loans that were given out by banks for whatever reason are being paid back at that low rate. And money is not, in order to open a new loan, to originate a new loan, you have to use the current interest rates, which were something like 6-7% if you're going to get an equity line or a credit line from a bank. So no one's going to want to pay that. So they're just paying down their old debt, not issuing new debt. And that's why the money supply falls. So imagine how much the money supply falls when there's no more reverse repos coming into the system. It's going to even contract even harder. So at that point, something's going to break. The Fed's going to have to print a lot more. And that should be the end of the dollar. 2 to 3 months away, maybe 4, maybe 5, whatever it is, doesn't matter. It's coming.
With that in mind, I wonder what your current thoughts are on having money in the banking system, because in the case of a collapse, many have pointed to the fact that we could see bail-ins, which is essentially the bank seizing depositor assets to make itself whole. On the other hand, obviously, it's difficult to function in society with nothing but cash under the mattress to transact with, especially when you have countries like Australia moving aggressively to take cash out of the system. There's a few countries in Europe that have basically already done that. How can people safeguard their wealth while still being able to transact in times like these?
Keep the minimum in a bank. I'd say keep a few months worth, maybe 3-4 months worth. Keep replenishing it after a few months. Make sure you have enough to pay your immediate bills. But when we started to the road to hyperinflation, you'll know it, and you'll gradually lower your balances in your bank account until you just want to keep them as close to zero as long as possible and not have any balance in there. And that is hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is just basically the lack of willingness to keep cash in the bank. So we'll maybe start at 6 months, and then we'll go to 5 and 4, and but eventually it's just gonna explode. And I think when the Fed turns around and has to print when those reverse repos run dry. So I don't think that we're going to see like 1 month, like let's say 10%, and the next month 15, and the next month 30. I think we're going to see like 1 month maybe 10, and the next month like thousands. That's what I think is going to happen. And yeah, I could be wrong. Maybe I'm hoping that, but the next Fed printing round is going to have to be so extreme that I don't see how the dollar can survive it more than a few days, because once it happens, anyone who owns treasuries overseas is going to sell them as quickly as possible when they see the Fed's buying. You're just going to get rid of them, take the dollars, and buy whatever real assets they can. All in the modern world, you can do this within a matter of hours. So yeah, I think hyperinflation is going to be just 1 month. It'll be like really annoying, bad inflation, maybe 10, 15, 20% maybe. And then the next month, just like it's gone. That's it. Done.
Well, the World Gold Council recently released their Q3 report, and they honed in on the fact that central banks continue to accumulate very large amounts of gold. Are they front-running the public in this sense? Do they know what's coming, and are they looking to protect themselves? Or is this more of a geopolitical game where they saw Russia's FX reserves get seized and they just want some form of money that is not seizable by their political opponents? What are your thoughts there?
Maybe it's that. Maybe it's that they don't want their assets seized. Maybe they do see that the dollar is dying. But even if they do, it's not going to help them to accumulate any gold. Right? It doesn't matter how much gold they have, because in order for it to mean anything, they have to make it exchangeable to the public, because they issue currencies. Currencies are for public use. If the public doesn't believe that their currencies that are issued by any central bank are exchangeable for the gold that they buy, what's the point of them having gold? What are they going to divvy it up among the administrators of the bank? Maybe, and then just leave. They could do that. They could just outright steal it, or give it to their heads of state or whatever, whoever the top honchos in whatever government they are, and just give them a few bars and then send them to some Pacific island or something. But it doesn't really, it's not going to stabilize currencies no matter how much gold a central bank puts on its balance sheet, because in order for that to matter, it has to be exchangeable at a fixed rate, or else it's irrelevant. Gold bugs like to look at. Oh, well, look at that. Central banks are buying all this gold. That means that we're going back to a gold standard. It doesn't mean we're going back to a gold standard. It just means that, yeah, maybe they do see something. Maybe they're battening down the hatches before there's a big catastrophe. But if there is a big catastrophe, there's going to be mobs of people, lynching. I'm not for violence, so let's use it. Being very not nice to central bank people, perhaps causing them bodily harm in the streets. That could happen. And then what good is their gold? It's not going to save them in the day of anger, to paraphrase the Bible. So let them accumulate gold. It does affect the price. I'm not saying it doesn't affect the price. It doesn't matter at all. It does, but it's not going to save them. It's not going to save their governments, and it doesn't really matter in the scheme of things.
Well, Rafi, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a ton of fun chatting with you. For those who want to learn more, could you tell us about the Endgame Investor and your Patreon as well?
Yeah, the Endgame Investor, I write about 3-4 times a week. It's a service through Seeking Alpha, and I take a monetary approach, talking about the monetary developments, trying to triangulate a time for when this is going to happen as I get more data. From an Austrian economics perspective, if you like Marie Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises back there, you'll like my approach. And my Patreon, I give more of a religious angle, a biblical angle on what's going on now, and it's getting pretty crazy there. That's for as little as $3 a month. You can get a weekly class that I give. And you can follow me on YouTube, Twitter. My YouTube channel is Rafi Farber, and I give a once a week video just summarizing what I'm thinking this week and developments and such.
Awesome. Well, I'll put links to all that in the description below for people who want to check it out. Thanks once again, Rafi, for joining us and sharing your knowledge with the audience.
You're welcome, Jesse.
And thank you for joining us today. As a reminder, this episode is brought to you by moneymetals.com. Use coupon code JesseDay to get a $10 discount on your first purchase. Link is in the description below, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.